Hey guys, welcome back. Today's story is about betrayal, revenge, and the moment someone realizes they've gone too far. It starts with a dinner at the most expensive steakhouse in the city, and ends with a life completely destroyed. Let's get into it. I'm standing in the middle of a sun-drenched garden, holding a glass of vintage champagne that costs more than my first month's rent. Across the lawn, two people are feeding each other wedding cake. The woman is my ex-wife. The man is my former best friend. And I'm the one who paid for the entire ceremony. Most people here think I'm a saint. They think I'm the bigger man, the guy who forgave the ultimate betrayal for the sake of true love. But as I watch them smiling at each other, I don't feel like a saint. I feel like a zookeeper who just locked the cage door. Because in about 30 seconds, I'm going to give a toast that guarantees they never, ever get away from each other. You see, when I found the videos on our shared home security cloud 6 months ago, I didn't scream. I didn't throw her clothes onto the lawn. And I didn't punch him in the face. Instead, I sat in the dark for 4 hours, watching, listening. I listened as they talked about how trapped they felt by me. I heard my best friend tell my wife that if it weren't for my boring, stable life, they'd be traveling the world, starting businesses, living the high life. That was the moment the boring guy decided to give them exactly what they wanted. Because I realized something. Their love wasn't built on loyalty. It was built on the thrill of the secret, the excitement of the forbidden. So I decided to take the secret away. A week later, I caught them, not by accident, but in a way that made me look like the devastated victim. I told them I wouldn't stand in the way of soulmates. I said they deserved to be happy. I even offered to help them start their new life together, because all I wanted was for them to follow their hearts. I gave her the house, but I didn't mention that the foundation is slowly crumbling, and the property taxes are about to triple next year. I gave him my blessing to take over my share of a joint investment, but I didn't tell him the company is currently under a federal audit, an audit I personally triggered with an anonymous tip. And today, I'm giving them this wedding. I tap my glass with a spoon. The clear ringing cuts through the garden air. The guests fall silent. I'd like to say a few words. I begin. My voice is calm, warm, exactly how a gracious ex-husband is supposed to sound. Most of you know our history. Most of you probably think this moment is a little awkward. A few nervous laughs ripple through the crowd. But I want everyone here to know something. I'm the one who pushed for this union. I look directly at my former best friend. He's sweating through his perfectly tailored suit. Then I turn to my ex-wife. She's trying very hard to keep that glowing, blushing bride smile on her face. Because these two deserve each other, I continue. In every sense of the word. They're so perfectly matched that I decided to make sure they never have to worry about anything else ever again. I reach into my pocket and pull out a small legal document, the kind printed on thick paper with far too many signatures. As my wedding gift, I say, I've transferred the deed to my grandfather's old cabin in the mountains into their names. A few guests murmur in admiration, but that's not all. I've also created a lifetime contract for a joint business venture, registered entirely under both of their names. The crowd bursts into applause. They think they're watching the most generous man alive. But when I catch my ex-wife's eyes, I see it. The first flicker of real panic. Because she knows exactly what that cabin is. 5 hours from the nearest city. No cell service. No neighbors. Nothing but trees and silence. And she also knows what that business venture is. A debt-heavy logistics company. One that legally requires both of their signatures for every single decision. Every loan. Every contract. Every problem. I've tied them together with a golden chain. And I've made sure the entire world is watching. So when they inevitably start to hate each other, they won't be able to walk away. They'll have to smile. Pretend everything is perfect. Because the generous saint gave them everything. And nobody likes a soulmate who complains about a free wedding. I raise my glass one last time. To the happy couple, I say, may you get exactly what you've earned. As I sit down, my phone vibrates in my pocket. A text message from a number I don't recognize. But the message is very clear. The audit is complete. The warrants are being signed on Monday. Hope the cake was worth it. The wedding ended at sunset. From the balcony, I watched as they drove away in a car covered in ribbons and "just married" signs. To everyone else, it looked like they were driving straight into a perfect sunset. But I knew the truth. They weren't heading toward a sunset. They were heading toward a cliff. The thing about forbidden love is that it only works when there's a common enemy. When I was the boring husband, I was the villain they could unite against. But now that I'm the generous benefactor, they only have each other to blame for their problems. It took exactly 3 weeks for the first cracks to appear. I had left them a small parting gift in the house. A hidden microphone in the kitchen. Yeah, I know. It makes me sound like a complete psycho. But when you spend 10 years building a life with someone, only to have it treated like a doormat, you start to lose interest in playing fair. I sat in my new, much smaller apartment, listening to the recordings while I ate dinner. Then I heard it. "Where's the money, Mark?" My ex-wife's voice cut through the static. Sharp. Angry. "You said the investment was a sure thing. Why is the bank calling about a freeze on the accounts?" "I don't know, Sarah," Mark shouted back. Something shattered in the background. A glass hitting the floor. "The lawyers say it's an audit. They're asking about transactions from 3 years ago, stuff I didn't even know about." "Well, fix it," she screamed. "He gave us this house. He gave us this life. And you're already losing it." Her voice cracked. At least when I was with him, I didn't have to worry about the power being turned off. I smiled to myself and took a slow sip of water. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. The comparison. The moment she realized the exciting guy was just a guy who knew how to spend someone else's money. Before the divorce, I had moved all of our liquid assets into long-term trust funds. 3-year vesting periods. On paper, they were wealthy. In reality, they couldn't touch a single dollar. But the real masterpiece wasn't the money. It was the social isolation. Over the past month, I'd quietly been confiding in our mutual friends. I never badmouthed them. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I told everyone how worried I was. I mentioned that I'd heard rumors about substance issues, or maybe gambling problems. I said that was why I was being so generous with the house and the wedding, because I wanted to help them get their lives together. So when they reached out to our old friend group for help, nobody offered them a cent. People just looked at them with quiet pity, telling them things like, "Maybe you should talk to a professional," or "You should be grateful for everything he already did for you." I had turned their entire support system into a wall of silent judgment. By the second month, the mountain cabin was their only option. They couldn't afford the property taxes on the main house anymore, and the federal audit had effectively blacklisted Mark from every firm in the city. I watched through the security cameras as they packed their bags. Their faces looked pale, exhausted. They didn't look like soulmates anymore. They looked like cellmates. "We'll just stay there for the summer," Mark said. His voice sounded hollow. "We'll get the logistics company running. It's a clean start, just like we wanted." What he didn't know was that the logistics company only had one client, a firm I owned through 3 layers of shell corporations. And the contract they signed at the wedding? It required 24-hour availability for emergency shipments. I was going to be their only source of income, and I was going to make sure they worked for every single penny. I called Mark that night, just to check in. "Hey man," I said, my voice full of fake concern. "I heard you guys are heading up to the cabin. I'm really glad you're taking some time for yourselves. Marriage is hard work, you know." There was a long pause on the other end. In the background, I could hear Sarah crying. "Yeah," Mark finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's great. We're really happy. Thanks again for everything." "Anytime," I replied, smiling at my reflection in the dark window. "I'll send the details for the first shipment soon. It's a big one. You'll need to be there by 4 a.m. Monday morning to sign for the cargo." I hung up before he could say anything else. Then I looked at the wedding photos sitting on my desk, the ones where they looked so confident, so smug. And that's when it hit me. The best part of revenge isn't the moment you strike. It's the moment the other person realizes they're already falling, and they were falling fast. The mountain cabin was exactly what I promised. Private, remote, and utterly suffocating. The first emergency shipment arrived that Monday morning. 2 massive crates filled with industrial equipment. Equipment I knew they had absolutely no way of moving or storing properly. I even timed the delivery so the truck would accidentally block the only road out. which meant they had no choice but to stand outside in the freezing mountain air for 6 hours, trying to sort out the paperwork. I listened to the audio feed from the cabin's porch. Then Sarah's voice exploded through the speakers. "It's not even for us." Her voice cracked from the cold. "We're just holding it? Why are we storing industrial drills in the middle of a forest, Mark? This isn't a business. It's a joke. It's the only way we're getting paid." Mark shouted back. "The contract says we're facilitators. If we don't sign, we lose the monthly retainer." His voice dropped slightly. "Do you want to go back to your parents' house? Do you want them to find out we're broke? At least my parents have heating," she shrieked. Then a heavy door slammed. Hard. The soulmates were starting to turn on each other. Their beautiful, forbidden romance was collapsing under the weight of ordinary life. Bills, cold weather, and exhaustion. But then, the story took a turn I never planned for. About a week into their mountain exile, Mark found the microphone. It wasn't hard. I'd actually left it just visible enough in the rafters, because I wanted them to notice it. I wanted the paranoia to begin. The recording went completely silent for 3 hours. Then suddenly, a new sound appeared. Tapping. Slow, deliberate tapping against the microphone. Then Mark's voice returned. But this time he wasn't yelling. He was whispering, right against the mic. "I know you're listening." My chest tightened. "And I know what you're doing," he continued. "You think you're the architect. You think you're the one in control." A quiet, unsettling chuckle followed. "But you forgot one thing about Sarah." My heart skipped a beat. I leaned closer to the speakers. "She didn't cheat on you because she loved me," Mark whispered. "She cheated on you because she needed someone to help her hide what she did to your grandfather's estate before he died." The room suddenly felt very cold. "You think you're the victim?" he continued softly. "Go check the probate records from 5 years ago. Look at the signatures on the life insurance policies." Then the recording cut out. Just like that. I sat there in the dark. The silence in my apartment suddenly felt like a vacuum. My grandfather had died 5 years ago. He left me the mountain cabin and a small inheritance that helped me start my life. I always assumed it was modest. I never questioned it. I was too busy grieving. I opened my laptop. My fingers moved across the keyboard almost automatically, searching public records I had ignored for years. 2 hours later, I found the documents. Digital scans of the original paperwork. And there it was. My grandfather's signature. The same one I remembered from birthday cards. But right beside it, as a witness, was Sarah's maiden name. At first, that didn't seem strange. But then I noticed something else. The amount. The policy wasn't for $50,000. It was for $2 million. And the beneficiary wasn't me. It was a trust fund. One that had been liquidated just 3 days after the funeral. Transferred to an offshore account I'd never even heard of. The room started spinning. I hadn't been the boring husband protecting a beautiful woman. I had been the obstacle, standing between her and money she had stolen from my own family. Mark didn't steal her from me. He had been her partner the entire time. Part of a plan that had been running quietly for 5 years. And my revenge wedding? It had just given them the perfect legal cover to move the last of the money. The logistics company I created wasn't a prison for them. They had been using it to move stolen funds through my own shell corporations, cleaning the money through businesses that legally belonged to me. I hadn't trapped them. I had just become their perfect getaway driver. I stared at the screen. Another realization hit me. Hard. The audit I triggered? It wasn't going to catch them. It was going to catch me. The anonymous tip I submitted was linked to my IP address, and every suspicious transaction the logistics company handled signed under my name as the official owner. Then I heard a car pull up outside my apartment. Heavy doors slamming. Men talking quietly outside. I didn't even bother looking out the window. I already knew who it was. I spent 6 months designing the perfect revenge, building a masterpiece, piece by piece, only to realize I was the one who had been painted into the corner. I picked up my glass of water. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the realization that the only person I had truly destroyed was myself. The door didn't burst open. There was just a firm, professional knock. The kind of knock that tells you running isn't an option anymore. I stood up, straightened my shirt, and walked toward the hallway. But as I passed the mirror, I caught a glimpse of the man I'd become. A man who had traded his soul for a little bit of spite. A man who was about to go to prison for a crime he didn't even realize he'd committed. I opened the door, but it wasn't the feds. It was a courier. He handed me a thick manila envelope and asked for a signature. From the mountain cabin, he said casually, barely looking at me as he handed over the pen. I went back inside and tore the envelope open. Inside were two things: a stack of photos and a single handwritten note from my ex-wife. The photos weren't of the cabin. They weren't of the crates. They were photos of me. Photos taken over the last 6 months. Photos of me sitting in the dark, listening to the microphones. Photos of me at the bank. Photos of me at the wedding. That's when it hit me. They hadn't just been soulmates having an affair. They had been watching me watch them. The entire revenge plan I thought I'd orchestrated had actually been choreographed by them. They knew I'd find the videos. They knew I'd try to be the bigger man. And they knew I'd start that logistics company because that was the one thing they needed. A clean way to move the last of the inheritance money out of the country. The note was short, written in her elegant, flowing script. Thank you for the wedding. It was beautiful. And thank you for the logistics company. It made the final transfer much easier than we expected. By the time you read this, we'll already be across the border and the audit will be your problem. You always were so predictable, always trying to be the hero, or the saint, or the architect. But you forgot the most important rule of the game. Never play against people who have nothing left to lose. I sat on the floor. The photos scattered around me like autumn leaves. That's when I realized something. The best man's toast wasn't my victory lap. It was my confession. In front of 100 witnesses, I had proudly admitted that I was the one who pushed for the union, the one who provided the assets, and the one who built the business. I had built my own gallows and walked up the steps smiling. The irony hit me so hard, I actually started laughing. A dry, hollow sound that echoed through the empty apartment. I'd spent 10 years with a woman I thought I knew, and I'd never really seen her face. I'd spent 20 years with a best friend I thought was my brother, but he was just a shadow, waiting for the sun to go down. I looked at the silver flash drive I'd kept, the one with the recordings of their misery, and suddenly, it felt worthless. It wasn't evidence against them. It was evidence against me. It showed my intent to harass them, my intent to manipulate them, and worst of all, it proved I knew about the shell corporations. I walked into the kitchen and turned on the stove. I watched the blue flame for a moment. Then I started feeding the photos into the fire, one by one. I watched my own face burn. I watched the wedding cake burn. And I watched the soulmates turn into ash. I'm writing this now from a small room that isn't mine, waiting for the legal team to finish their first review of the logistics records. They say it doesn't look good. Apparently, ignorance isn't much of a defense when your signature is on every page. My wife and my best friend are gone, probably sitting on some beach somewhere, drinking the champagne I paid for, laughing about the boring guy who thought he was the mastermind. They didn't ruin each other. They saved each other, and they used me as the bridge to get to their new life. I let them win, not because they were smarter, but because I was too arrogant to realize. I was playing a game. I thought I was the one holding the leash. But in reality, I was just the dog being led to the vet. So if you ever find out your partner is cheating, take my advice. Don't try to be the bigger man. Don't try to be the architect. And definitely don't give a toast at their wedding. Just walk away. Because sometimes, the only way to win the game is to stop playing before the other side even realizes you've seen the board. I'm sitting here now, listening to the silence of my own life. And I've realized something. They didn't just take my money. They didn't just take my house. They took my ability to believe that I was the hero of my own story. And that's a debt I'll be paying for the rest of my life. So tell me something. Would you have seen the trap? Or would you have been just as blind as I was?